Welcome in, everybody, to the flagship podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined by the managing editor of Horns 24/7, Taylor Estes, and we are recapping a painful 41-34 loss by the Texas Longhorns at Oklahoma State. The road woes in true road games under Steve Sarkisian continue. The Longhorns lose their fifth straight true road game after holding another 31-17 lead late in the third quarter. This was almost identical, Taylor, to the Big 12 opener at Texas Tech. Texas led that one 31-17 with 4:27 left in the third quarter. Couldn't keep its offense on the field, couldn't run the football. Ended up losing that game 37-34 in overtime. Texas had a 31-17 lead with 3 minutes and change at Oklahoma State after pretty much dominating the first half, thanks to great special teams play and then a resurgent defensive effort in the third quarter and some big play touchdowns. Texas didn't hold the ball long, but they scored. A 42-yard touchdown run by Bijan Robinson, a 52-yard touchdown run by Roschon Johnson kind of inflated the running numbers because they didn't run the ball well in the second half, and Quinn Ewers was under siege. He couldn't connect with Xavier Worthy. He found him 4 times, but he targeted him 17 times, missed him 13 times, and Jatavian Sanders ends up as the leading receiver for Texas, and sadly, he's been money when you throw the football to him. And as Texas was desperately trying to tie the game in the final seconds, the ball goes through his hands and into the hands of an Oklahoma State defender for Quinn Ewers' third interception. Taylor, this was a disappearing act by the Texas offense, and Steve Sarkisian's got to figure this out because we're seeing a repeat of these disappearing acts by the Texas offense in the second half of Big 12 road games.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Chip. And the only consistent aspect of this is Steve Sarkisian and the play calling on offense. I mean, that is what it comes down to. I think Steve Sarkisian is a fantastic play caller on offense, but time and again, he has shown that he gets, I don't know if it's conservative. I don't know if he gets nervous. I don't know what it is that happens in his mental makeup to where when Texas, especially in road games, have had the lead in these games, it's like it's embarrassing almost that his mantra is all gas no brakes, because it's almost all brakes no gas at some point. And the fact alone that Bijan Robinson has that 41-yard touchdown, and then for I believe it was like 6 drives afterwards, the only time that Bijan Robinson actually was handed the ball off was on first downs only. It's like that. I mean, I'm not a coach, and I can sit there and watch exactly how this game was going to be called. And that's on Steve Sarkisian as the offensive play caller. Again, he is an elite offensive play caller. At the end of the day, though, Chip, if you are going to be a head coach plus the offense coordinator, play caller, call it what you is, he is the offensive coordinator essentially. You have to have people on your staff that you trust enough that you're going to actually listen to what they're seeing as the play goes on, and not just looking at the next 2 plays, on your script or whatever it may be. And I think that's one of the biggest things that Steve Sarkisian has really struggled in, especially in road games with Texas when they've had a lead. I mean, Texas had at one point a double-digit lead only to fall and lose in this game. And there's no denying that Quinn Ewers was bad, right? Like, this is the worst performance, I think it's fair to say. And I don't like saying that players are bad ever, like, especially like, I feel like quarterbacks get the old Mac Brown mantra. They get more credit when they don't deserve it, and they get more blame when they don't deserve it. But this was a very forgettable performance, I think, for Quinn Ewers on offense, but he wasn't getting a lot of help from his playmakers on offense. And it almost seemed like Steve Sarkisian was so quick to abandon the run game, which was actually like working, in the first half. I mean, this is against a good run defense that Texas faced, and it just ended up to being like a 3-and-out-a-thon essentially for Texas. And that is the worst case scenario for any defense in any level of the sport, in any level of of football. If your offense continues to go 3-and-out, you're putting your defense in a really, really poor position. And I feel like the Texas defense held up as much as they possibly could. But then the injury with to Anthony Cook, having Michael Taft in the game, obviously there was a touchdown that was like thrown on him. I mean, it was just like the worst case scenario for Texas in this game. But I think at the end of the day, it starts with Steve Sarkisian and the way that he manages these games.
Yeah, I mean the Texas defense for is up and down, and a lot of down in the first half, giving up big plays. They totally responded in the third quarter, held Oklahoma State to 5 straight punts, and then gave up a field goal. The Texas offense, meanwhile, was doing very little. In fact, the only points they got in the second half of this game were set up by the special teams.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Trejo had a 52-yard punt go out inside the 1. The Texas defense kept Oklahoma State deep in their own end. And then when Oklahoma State punted it to Xavier Worthy, he had a 29-yard punt return to the Oklahoma State 20. They were immediately in field goal range, and the offense couldn't move the ball. They ended up with a 33-yard field goal. That was it. That was their only points in the second half. Really frustrating. You could see how determined Bijan Robinson was. They did have one of their second to last drive. There was a pass to Jaleel Billingsley, his first catch of the season. Then Bijan Robinson ran for 13 tough yards, and it looked like they were going to be able to, hammer on the ground and maybe establish that running game just in time. But it didn't happen. They got away from the run, as you said. They ran it on first down, then they went to throwing it through 2 incomplete passes. The penalties were a nightmare. 14
14
penalties for
to nothing.
over 100 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma State
119 yards, yeah.
Oklahoma State had 0 penalties. Just unbelievable. But Texas was, they had the ball deep in Oklahoma State territory after a Brennan Thompson 32-yard catch and run, his first catch of the season. They get down inside the red zone and go backward on the next 3 plays because of false starts on Jatavian Sanders, Andre Carrick. It was shoot, ready, aim on offense tonight. And, as Spencer Sanders was making plays with his legs late in that game and throughout the game when needed, he does what Spencer Sanders does. He makes plays. He's a warrior. He finds ways to win. You almost started thinking, should Texas put Hudson Card in, because Quinn Ewers was 2 of 10 passing in the second half. He was 2 of 7 in the third quarter. It just did not seem comfortable at all. There were times where he left the pocket when the rush wasn't there. And so it just was, people were making a big deal about Quinn Ewers wearing a glove in warmups. And, I asked some sources, did something happen to Quinn Ewers? One source said they thought he had a finger slammed in a door, but that's on Steve Sarkisian. If he knows of something, and he said there was nothing wrong with Quinn. Of course, he said there was nothing wrong with Casey Thompson at Iowa State last year when in cold weather, Casey's thumb wouldn't get, it would stiffen up. So I don't know, Taylor. It's
I guess Casey's thumb injury has gone over to his time at Nebraska too. I divert. Go ahead.
no. Let's not go there.
I feel like that's always
Hudson
an
Card,
excuse.
as everything's going, you know, just sputter splat with the Texas offense. I mean, was I the only one thinking, do you put Hudson Card in for a series just to see? He can
No.
run around. And at some
Yeah.
point, the Steve Sarkisian get off of his high horse about not running his quarterback. Quinn Ewers runs for 33 yards into Oklahoma State territory. And of course, there's a holding penalty that brings it back in the second half. You know, it's tough because special teams played so well in this game, and Texas didn't even capitalize on all of the special teams. For the second straight game, they block a punt. Mo Blackwell blocks a punt, and that does lead to points. But Keelan Robinson recovers a muffed punt in Oklahoma State territory. Sarkisian goes for it on fourth down, doesn't make it, turns down the field goal. They get nothing out of that muffed punt by Oklahoma State, and then you had Daniel Trejo twice in the third quarter pinning Oklahoma State inside the 10. The defense doing what it's supposed to do, and the offense doing nothing. So it's one of those games where you're just, you can't have 14 penalties for 100 plus yards. That's on the coach and these players not being prepared. And when you look at the fact that you were able to throw the football to Bijan Robinson, and you got a big play out of it, and then you go away from, where's the counter off of the plays that are successful? I mean, like you said, Steve Sarkisian knows you run plays to set up other plays.
Yeah, you
And
run especially with
there's
the running back room that Texas has. It's
right.
not
You
just
got two
Bijan Robinson. They have the best running back room in college football. I
got
don't
two
think anyone would
gladiators.
argue that. Yeah,
They'll do
exactly.
anything to help their team
Mhm.
win. It just, there was a great play design for Xavier Worthy on that, where he goes into orbit motion and then he cuts back and he's wide open and he runs in for an easy touchdown. Why are these plays all in the first half? And then when things get tight, the play calling creativity disappears.
Yeah.
And I think that's the frustrating point because we saw this last year. We saw it at Texas Tech.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
honestly I do think that at the end of the day, it's difficult to be the head coach and also the offense coordinator or play caller, whatever we want to call Steve Sarkisian. That I think that's the reality of the situation. Steve Sarkisian got the job at Texas because he is an elite offensive play caller. However, he needs to have people on his staff, or at least at the bare minimum in the box, the press box, in the booth, watching this and telling him, hey, this is what's going on, like that you can't see this. Because I feel like when you're an offensive play caller and you're also the head coach and you have to monitor every single thing on the field, you're not watching the play that's going down. You are thinking of the one and two other plays that follow that play. And so I feel like there's just a lot of missed in-game type of situational awareness instances where Steve Sarkisian has struggled, and they've happened at the worst time. I mean, I go back to I was talking to a longtime coach who has been a defensive coach, a head coach, everything you can think of, an athletic director at one point. I was talking to him today after the game. And I had said, I was like, I feel like Steve Sarkisian lacks situational awareness in games. And he pointed out that the reality is it's so hard for head coaches to also be the play callers on offense because they're thinking ahead. They're not really watching things that go down like on the field as they happen. And they're like I brought up the Texas Tech game, for instance, when Jordan Whittington late in the fourth quarter, he caught the ball in bounds. The ball was, they called him out of bounds or something like that. But if you go back to the replay, he caught the ball in bounds and the call was he was out of bounds. He didn't bobble the ball after that. Yet Steve Sarkisian throws the punt team on the field, and there's 17 seconds on the play clock when the punt team actually punts the ball. And it's like, that I feel like was a glimpse of what we were about to see at Oklahoma State, because there's just so many instances where I feel like there's a rush to get like the next play in with Steve Sarkisian as the play caller. And it happened at the end of the game, probably at the worst time. That last, the dagger interception that Quinn Ewers did throw, the offense was finally moving. It was moving in the passing game. They were rolling. And there may be some people that will sit here and say that you should have made a quick play or play call or whatever, get the play call in and let him keep trying to roll. The reality is Quinn Ewers has struggled all game long. Spike the ball. Like, why did they not spike the ball with no timeouts left when they're in striking zone? Give Quinn Ewers a time to, think about the play that should be actually made. It wasn't necessarily a bad throw. I think that it was a catchable ball, but still, there was no rush there at the end of the game, yet it was rushed. Like when Texas went up to the line, I was like, oh, they're going to spike it, take some time. And then all of a sudden he takes a snap. Quinn Ewers takes a snap. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Like, I guess I'm an armchair quarterback, whatever they call it. But still, I'm sitting here like, what on earth is happening right now? Because he struggled all game. Why are you rushing it? Why are you forcing it? Why are you pushing it? And it's almost like that is what Steve Sarkisian has become as a play caller, especially late in games, especially on the road, and when games are, could either go one way or the other. And it just seems to always go the other way, Chip. And it's hard not to think that this is a problem from the top and not, just a talent issue. And I will say this, like, I feel like I was probably one of the only people, or one of the few people, that was very like, oh, Texas doesn't have the talent on the roster last season. All these losses, there was a reason, there was an excuse. He's got to get his players in, all of these type of things. Now it's like, no, this starts at the head. This starts at the top of the food chain here at Texas. And the top of the food chain seems to push and seems to rush when things really start getting in a pressure situation. And it's hard to watch at times, honestly, because, when things start rolling, it's like, let me find a way to stumble over my own feet and not, spike the ball or give Quinn Ewers a chance to take a breather or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like being like, like emotional or whatever. I just thought, like, I couldn't believe that was how the game ended.
Well,
Like, I can't believe it.
there is a consistent pattern with
Mhm.
the offense falling off in these road games. And, when Texas was at home last week against Iowa State and they had to run the ball, Sark stuck with it. He just kept running the football, and his players came through for him. And the lack of persistence in running the football, and I get it, Oklahoma State is doing things to keep you from being able to run the football, but the counterplay was working all night. And it, you got to find ways to run the football based on what you've done already in that game. You either have to add a little wrinkle to it or play action off of it. It didn't seem like Sarkisian was setting up plays in the second half. It seemed like he was going through his call sheet and, looking at the Oklahoma State defense and thinking, well, we should be able to take advantage of that. They had 3 starters out, 5 starters total, and a backup receiver out, all due to injury. Including the starting safety, starting defensive tackle, and a starting defensive end.
Leading receiver too.
Leading receiver. And yet Oklahoma State, stayed with it, got more determined. And it felt like Texas was kind of running the ball right into the hands of the Oklahoma State defense instead of, a jet sweep here and there. I mean, if you can't connect with Worthy, or if Quinn Ewers is off, how about some different ways of getting the football to your playmakers with a flip pass, jet sweep, whatever it takes. We haven't seen that in a minute. And with Oklahoma State, they've they've it's the worst pass defense in the league, and Texas made them look like they were Iowa State this week.
Right.
It's hard to explain what was going on with Quinn Ewers because as good as he looked against Alabama and Oklahoma, I thought he'd be able to look at the Oklahoma State defense and tell what was going on. But Oklahoma State did what Iowa State did. They played that three high safety. Quinn Ewers clearly struggles with it. And guess what? Kansas State's up next. They play the three high safety. And as of right now, K-State's beating TCU in Fort Worth 28-17, and that's Texas's next opponent in Manhattan. So they've got to spend this off week making sure that Quinn Ewers is more comfortable with that, that 3-5-3, the 3-8 cloud defense, because that defense invites you to run the football. You've got Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson. You have to run the football. You have to find a way to run the football. You have to, demand it of your players. You can't, just go away from it on the road. I mean, you have to run the football to end these games. You're up 31-17 with, 4 minutes, 3 minutes left, and you got to be able to run the football to impose your will, demoralize teams, shut up their crowd, and get the ball in the hands of your best players, your best weapon. And I think that's what's so frustrating. You saw Bijan Robinson, grinding, doing everything he could on that 13-yard run, and then they go away from him. And so it's I get it. Steve Sarkisian is looking for the home run ball through the air, and in this game, he had a counter play. Actually, two counter plays. I think Bijan scored on a counter, and Roshan scored on a counter. Oklahoma went back to the counter last year against Texas over and over again. Um, Run it till they stop it. So it just it's frustrating because we expect the offense to be able to carry the load, especially against the Big 12's worst pass defense, and that did not happen tonight.
No, and it's again back to the situational in-game awareness. I feel like that's the biggest key from this game. Is like Quinn Ewers was not on his game. Xavier Worthy was not on his game. Say what you will about, obviously there were a lot of balls that Quinn Ewers threw Xavier Worthy's way. Xavier Worthy doesn't make the extra effort to make plays. He's done that. We've talked about this, Chip, you and I, all season long. There have been way too many times for an All-American receiver to be on the field and the ball is just like a little above his head and it's like his arms are at his side. That's unacceptable. Like that's poor effort. That is poor preparation. It's everything negative that you can think of for a player. That's not an all-American caliber of play, and he's not playing at that level. And so you have your number one receiver with struggling, with your quarterback struggling. Oh, and you have the best run game in the country, running backs in the country, running back room at least in the country, who also can be threats in the passing game. And it was like, was Bijan Robinson on the field at the end of the game?
Yeah, I mean,
I
I
don't
don't know
think
how
he
you're
was.
not doing
Was he?
everything you can.
Mhm.
I mean, you've got good receivers who can block
It's
to
like
get
Reggie
Bijan
Bush not being on the
Robinson.
field for USC in that 2005 national championship game. Who was the offensive coordinator?
Yeah, I mean, it's and that's, I don't know if there's any correlation there, but I mean, you've got to scheme to get the ball into the hands of Bijan Robinson. The guy's an absolute gladiator, and he's the guy who can demoralize opposing defenses. And
Mhm.
so,
And
to
between him and Roshan Johnson, mind you, they had 200, what was it? Sorry, I'm not very good at math. I'm reading 213 yards rushing between the two of them.
right, Right, and a lot of those came on the 2 big touchdown run or the 2 long runs in the game, but still, um, you gotta keep handing the ball to Bijan Robinson because even if it goes for 2 yards or 1 yard or 0 yards, he will pop that long run, and that's the you it just I'm surprised because I
Yeah.
thought they would learn from the Texas Tech game that you cannot go away from the run, no matter how good. Texas Tech has a good front as well. Oklahoma
Mhm.
State has a good front, but you've got to find a way. And I like the counter power stuff because you know you get a lead blocker in that situation, and Bijan does great with a lead blocker. You can run more gap power stuff and not just the zone stuff. And I it's frustrating because now you've got 2 weeks to sort of figure it all out, but you've probably cost yourself um, any real chance of getting into the Big 12 race. And as DeMarvian Overshone said after this game, we got to keep our heads from going into dark places now because for 2 weeks, Texas is going to hear about how they've blown any chance to get back into the Big 12 race. And we know how this team started to check out when the losses started to pile up last year. And all we've heard this year is how the the maturity, the poise, the lessons learned. It's a different team. We're more together.
The culture,
The
yeah.
culture. So it's fragile. It's fragile, and if not for that, if not for that play by Anthony Cook last week, forcing the fumble, who knows how that Iowa State game finishes up in the red zone late in the game, or at least at the 28 with a chance to kick a field goal. Um, it's this is this is the last thing that Texas needed in a loss was a carbon copy of how they lost the Texas Tech game. Um, Texas blocked a punt, recovered a muffed punt. And when you do those things, your odds of winning soar.
Mhm.
And Texas led this game through the second, third quarter, well into the fourth quarter, and couldn't gain an inch when it mattered and ends up getting shut out in the fourth quarter after a 31-point first half. That's just astounding.
Yeah.
You know, Oklahoma State made great adjustments. Texas made really good adjustments on defense, but no adjustments on offense. Either that or Quinn Ewers, maybe there was something wrong with his hand. And if that is the case, that's on Steve Sarkisian. He's got
Mhm.
to get his backup quarterback in there to see if he can move the football when it's punt, punt, punt. Your defense is hanging on, hanging on, hanging on. And then, of all things, Deshaun Jameson, you know, has the guy in his hands on a slant for about 7 yards. And, Bryson Green, I think it was, wiggles loose and Jaron Thompson doesn't finish the tackle.
Oh my
And
gosh, yeah.
his
We
teammate
should
has him hold. That's every safety's dream is to come and clean that guy up. And
we should get Michael Griffin on the podcast, I think, for our interview.
I guarantee you Anthony Cook would have cleaned that tackle up. And
Yeah.
that's a tough thing for Jaron Thompson. In the Insider this past week, I wrote about a team source saying that Jaron Thompson can sometimes ebb and flow with the way the game is going. His energy can drop when things are not going well, and there was a perfect example of it. That's when you need to be hitting the hardest,
Yeah.
and so uh, Green wiggles free and goes for a 41-yard touchdown, ends up being the game-winning points.
Well, and also he did that consistent like the OU game last year, Chip. I
Right,
mean,
right.
I'm not gonna
And
say
he's
what
played better
Michael
this year. He's played a
he
lot better,
has
but
been,
he
but those are gonna be the ones that we're going to point to at the end of the season, right?
and
Yeah.
that's where it gets tough because look, everyone can make plays when you're winning. Everyone can make
Mhm.
plays when you're at home. Um, you got to be the guy that turns it on the road. You got to be the guy that makes the play that and he had opportunities. He had a pass go right through his hands, and that's a pass breakup. That's great. But when it goes through your hands, man, you got to catch that. And Texas had a couple of those situations. Jahdae Barron had a pass go through his hands. Ryan Watts made a great interception, a huge interception in the end zone that killed a 8-play drive.
Right.
Um, you know, right there in the second quarter when Texas needed it, and um, it just a really disappointing performance from the Texas offense in the second half, and Steve Sarkisian's got to get that figured out, and they got to get Quinn Ewers comfortable with looking at that 3 high safety look, so that when Texas goes to Manhattan on November 5th, they know what they're doing because that game, K-State has a more complete defense than Oklahoma State.
Right.
That'll be harder. That'll be a harder game. And you have another top end running quarterback with a top end running back. Oklahoma State doesn't even have a good running back. I mean,
Mhm.
Dominic Richardson, no offense, but he wasn't doing anything. And he really didn't do anything in this game except for a couple of goal line touchdowns. So, um, Texas, until they start winning on the road, and I said this last week, Taylor, until Texas starts winning in true road games, don't talk about being in the Big 12 title race or college football playoff chances. They're 1-6 in true road games under Steve Sarkisian. They've lost 5 in a row. That has to change. So
Yeah, it 100% does, especially with um, multiple road games still ahead for Texas. They have to next game at Kansas State. That they have there's a bye week in between. That's the third, right? November 3rd, I think. I don't have the
November
calendar.
5th,
Is it the 5th?
K State.
Yeah, whatever. The first weekend in November, that's their first road game. They'll have a home game with TCU and then another road game against Kansas, which is definitely not a gimme game in any way, shape, or form. I mean,
No road
you
game.
watch no, nothing on Texas schedule in general is a gimme game. I mean, Texas is sitting here at 5 wins. There is no gimme games on the schedule. They have to find a way to win at least another one, at least one, because if they don't, then the calls for Steve Sarkisian's job, let's be honest, are going to be at an all-time high. And I'm not saying I am advocating for that. I don't think either one of us would advocate for anything like that. I think it's too soon.
Yeah, not at
But you
this point.
can't yeah, but you can't have back-to-back non-bowl appearance seasons without that actually being something that comes to fruition, whether you agree with it or not. It's just the way that things go at Texas. So there's a lot that Texas has to figure out and iron out. This needs to, I said this on our podcast leading up to the game before I thought Texas was going to lose. I said this needs to be the best bye week of preparation that Texas has ever had because what is on the schedule in November, not only is it a gauntlet stretch, I would say, it's a gauntlet stretch that nobody expected. I mean, let's be real. Like nobody expected TCU to be at the top of the conference right now. Nobody expected that Kansas State would have 5 wins, a better record than Baylor when they're facing Baylor on the road today. And I know they did lose that game, but still, Texas still has to face Baylor. And the biggest test, in my opinion, is on the road at Kansas State, which is in 2 weeks from now. So this needs to be the best bye week of preparation. And there's so much that honestly, I'm not trying to be like the hot take type of person or anything like that, but there's a lot that is on the line, honestly, from both the players, but more importantly for Steve Sarkisian and the staff. And we know how quick Texas has been to fire coaches. And if Texas, oh,
They'll
you're
let
mute.
Sarkisian make some changes if he needs to. You know,
That's fine, but he has 3 years then, right? The
Well, I'm not going to get
3 to
into Steve
4.
Sarkisian's job security
I
tonight.
know, but I am saying, though, he has to win. He has to make a bowl game to shut these conversations down.
Right. I mean, he needs to show
Yes.
progress.
Yes,
You
and
know, if he
there's
wants to keep
yes.
Arch Manning, if he wants to keep all the negativity away from the program and maintain the momentum that he's built, he's got to finish strong, and he's got to. I said 8 wins in Arch Manning would be a successful season. He's got to find 3 more wins on the
What
schedule
wins
for
do you think
that.
there are?
Yeah, I mean, you got to win your home games. You got to beat TCU and Baylor at home, and I thought they could split, or I said they needed to go 2-1 in this stretch against Oklahoma State, K-State, and TCU. Now they got to win against K-State and TCU to, and hope and get help if they want to try and backdoor their way in to the Big 12 title game. But after tonight and the trend of not being able to, finish games, not being able to run the football to finish games, when you ran the football for over 200 yards tonight and over, over 5 yards per carry. It
Yeah,
just
yeah, I feel like it's not a matter of not being able to run the football, it's getting away from running the football, and that falls on Steve Sarkisian because the run game, sure, there were some negative plays, there were some, 1, 2, 3 yard plays, but with the running back room that Texas has, it's going to shape out that way, and then they're going to break off for a big gain because there's the talent there. It's Steve Sarkisian not relying on the run game when he needed to, and the quarterback obviously was struggling. Like, why? It's a head scratcher. And at the end of the day, the only consistent thing is Steve Sarkisian's play calling in these games.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are times where you need to have a running quarterback on the field, or you need to surprise the defense with. I mean, Quinn Ewers showed on the 33-yard run that ended up getting called back. The guy can move,
Yeah.
um, but a holding call brings it back, and um, Steve Sarkisian doesn't want to run the quarterback at a time where a lot of college football uh, outside of Alabama runs the quarterback. Texas won a national championship with an elite runner at quarterback. Um, a lot of coaches say they'll never run an offense without a quarterback who's a threat to run because it just causes too many problems for the defense, as Texas learned again with Spencer Sanders. So this is a tough one, and if it was back and forth the whole way, and it was a consistently well played game, that'd be one thing. But Texas was up 31-17, had great special teams play. Not good, great.
Great.
Blocked a punt, recovered a muffed punt, 2 punts inside the 10, two big punt returns. Um, you know, that's great special teams play. It's the second straight game Texas has blocked a punt. And then the defense makes adjustments, plays really well in the third quarter, and allows you to regroup, allows you to find your footing as an offense, and you don't do it with Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson, Jordan Whittington, um, and Steve Sarkisian's got to look in the mirror and figure it out with Quinn Ewers and Xavier Worthy, and he's got to figure it out fast because um, this show has to go on the road. It can't just be a hometown home game thing.
Hmm.
Or when you have half the house and all the players amped out of their minds to play against Oklahoma, you've got to hold up when the other team's slapping paddles, till your ears bleed. And you got to have players who can turn it. Bijan Robinson can turn it. He was trying to turn it. Um, I don't know what's going on with Xavier Worthy. It's frustrating. He
It
doesn't
is.
doesn't fight for the ball. He's not a big contested catch guy, but, He runs
It's like a
great
solar
routes.
eclipse, like, hits the sun every time that the ball is in the air, and he, like, loses sight of where he is. It's weird.
Yeah, it's weird.
Contested catches, he's terrible at it this season.
And meanwhile, Jatavian Sanders makes one contested catch after another, and just amazing that it would go off his hands to end the game with Ewers' third interception.
Yeah.
All right, it was a tough one, folks. We're not telling you anything you don't know if you're a Texas fan. And Steve Sarkisian has a lot to figure out because his team is better than what it showed. His
Yeah.
offense, he has more offensive firepower than 3 points in the second half against the Big 12's worst pass defense. And he's got to look in the mirror and get that figured out and figure it out fast because K-State is next. And we will have a preview
Hold on,
of
Chip, real
the.
quick. Sorry, I don't wanna cut you off. Real quick, I wanna make sure that it's known, like, I am not saying when I was talking about Steve Sarkisian's job, I'm not saying that I think he should be on the hot seat or anything like that if there is a losing season or anything along those lines. I just know how Texas has been with coaches, and so I just wanna make it very clear. I'm not trying to say we're talking about his job security, anything like that. That is not the case. I just know how quick Texas has been to replace head coaches, whether it's right or wrong. So that was all I was saying was like two losing
Yeah, you
seasons
don't
is
want it to
not it.
snowball.
No, exactly. Two losing seasons at Texas is like, oh gosh, here we go. You know what
Right.
I mean? So
Right. And
that I just want to make that clear. Yeah.
Oklahoma State's the number 11 ranked team in the country at this moment.
Hmm.
And so Texas somehow was favored to win this game, even though they're the 20th ranked team and had lost 4 straight true road games. Didn't understand that. But yeah, no, I think you were talking about you don't want it to snowball. You don't want
Hmm.
one loss to lead to another like we saw last year.
Hmm.
And Texas has got to, when you lose a game that you're leading 31-17 late in the third quarter, like you did against Texas Tech, then you need to go win a game you're not expected to win. And Texas will have that opportunity on November 5th at Kansas State, which is now in a dogfight with TCU. It's a 4-point game as we wrap up the flagship podcast recapping Texas's 41-34 loss at Oklahoma State. We will, of course, be back next week. We will not. I don't know what we're doing for Monday, actually, with no opponent, but we will.
Michael Griffin.
Yeah, maybe.
We may need to try to get him on.
All right.
Get an
For Taylor
unfiltered look.
Estes, I am Chip Brown. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening to our recap of the Texas Oklahoma State game. Until next time, we'll see you at horns247.com. Until then, stay safe and keep the faith.